The truth is, we spend much of our lives trying to live up to the expectations of others. We all know the feeling, the anxiety, the weight on your shoulders, that constant need to meet the expectations set for you, often by people you don't even know very well. It's exhausting, isn't it? It can drain you mentally, emotionally, and physically as you chase after the approval of people who, in many cases, might not even notice or care about the effort you put in. This is a cycle many of us get trapped in without even realizing it. But the simple truth is this: you don't owe anyone the responsibility to live up to their expectations. Imagine for a second that you woke up every day knowing that your worth was solely based on your own standards, not anyone else's. How liberating would that feel? No more wondering if you're doing enough, being enough, pleasing enough. It's almost as though you would be able to breathe more easily. You could start to live with the freedom of being true to yourself, instead of wearing yourself out by trying to meet others' expectations. Expectations which, let's face it, are often more about their projections of who you should be, rather than when we talk about projection, as Carl Jung described it, it's a psychological defense mechanism. Projection happens when someone attributes their own feelings, thoughts, or insecurities to someone else. It's a way to protect their own fragile self-image or to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. So when someone imposes their expectations on you or criticizes you for not meeting them, it often has very little to do with your actual behavior and everything to do with their inner world. It's about their fears, their unresolved issues, and their limitations. Let that sink in for a moment. In fact, most of the time, people aren't judging you as harshly as you think. Sure, it may seem like they're giving you the side eye, whispering behind your back, or silently criticizing every choice you make. But here's the kicker: they're probably too busy focusing on their own insecurities, their own life, their own worries to be thinking about you in the way you imagine. And even if they are, so what? Why let their fleeting judgments, which have no lasting value, take up mental real estate in your life? The philosopher Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic emperor, reminds us in his writings, so many who were remembered are already forgotten, and those who remembered them long gone. In other words, the judgments people have of you today won't matter in a year, 5 years, or even 20 years. We spend so much of our energy in trying to shape our lives to be palatable to others, forgetting that these opinions will fade into nothingness over time. The things that seem so important today, the worries about how we appear, will be nothing more than distant memories in the future. And yet we allow these judgments to hold so much weight. It's as if we've handed over the keys to our own self-worth, giving others the power to determine whether we feel good about ourselves or bad. But the real power lies within us, and it's up to us to take it back. Your happiness, your sense of self-worth, your ability to thrive, all of it is within your control. The moment you stop seeking validation from others and begin to listen to your own voice, you start to step into your own power. Now, let's dive a little deeper into the psychology of validation, because this is where things get really interesting. Have you ever noticed how, in today's digital age, we can spend hours on social media, checking likes, comments, and shares? It's as if our self-esteem is directly linked to how many people click like or share our posts. This, my friend, is not real validation. It's a shallow form of approval that doesn't feed the soul. It's like trying to fill a well with a bucket full of holes. No matter how much you try to fill it, it will never be enough. This phenomenon is called social comparison theory, a concept coined by psychologist Leon Festinger in the 1950s. He suggested that people determine their own social and personal worth based on how they stack up against others. But here's the thing. When we start comparing ourselves to others on social media, whether it's someone's filtered photos, their seemingly perfect life, or their curated accomplishments, we're not comparing ourselves to reality. We're comparing ourselves to a version of reality that's been distorted, edited, and carefully crafted to make someone else appear a certain way. Imagine, for a moment, how exhausting would be if your self-worth depended entirely on others' validation. Every day you'd be chasing after fleeting moments of recognition, hoping that the next like would make you feel little more whole. But when we rely on others for validation, we become addicted to their approval. And like any addiction, it leaves us feeling empty when we don't get it. The secret to breaking free from this cycle is to start validating ourselves, to accept our flaws and strengths without needing anyone else's permission. This brings us to the Stoic philosophy of control. The Stoics teach us a valuable lesson. There are things in life we can control and things we can't. In fact, this is what the Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote about in his Discourses. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. The opinions of others are outside of our control. We cannot dictate how people think, what they say, or how they act, but we can control our reactions. We can choose how much weight to give to their opinions, and more importantly, we can choose to prioritize our own happiness and self-worth above the judgments of others. Consider this for a moment. If you're giving someone else the power to determine your happiness, then you're effectively letting them live your life for you. Your life becomes a reflection of their standards, their desires, and their judgments, instead of being a reflection of your own truth. So, how do we begin to break free from this? How do we stop living for others and start living for ourselves? First, we need to understand that our worth is not determined by what anyone else thinks of us. Your true self-worth comes from within. It's about embracing who you are, all of your quirks, imperfections, strengths, and weaknesses, and recognizing that you are enough as you are. If we can learn to live authentically without constantly measuring ourselves against others' standards, we can step into a life filled with real fulfillment. And the more we do this, the more we'll attract the right people into our lives, those who appreciate us for who we truly are, not for the version we've tried to create in order to fit their expectations. As Friedrich Nietzsche wisely said, he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. When you live for the approval of others, you are essentially staring into the abyss of their expectations, letting those expectations shape you. But when you stop focusing on what others want and start living for yourself, you free yourself from the monsters of judgment and self-doubt. Ultimately, life is too short to be spent worrying about what others think. Instead, spend that time cultivating your own inner peace, embracing your true self, and finding joy in your own journey. You have the power to define your life, not based on external validation, but on your own truth. So let go of the weight of other people's expectations and step into the freedom of being who you truly are.